All right, there's a little bit of Matt Rhule and kind of ending on an appropriate note because
Yeah.
everyone wonders about the quarterback position, and Rhule mentioning there that he is comfortable having 3 scholarship quarterbacks in the spring, and then if things work out, adding a fourth. I would probably throw in there that at the very least, whether it's one of the walk-ons who's already on the team, or if you find another preferred walk-on slash NIL scholarship slash, guy deep in the transfer portal sometime after the spring, that would probably be nice. I think you definitely want to be in a position, Josh, not that you have to play 4 deep, but that you could if you absolutely needed to, because as we have seen, Nebraska last year had to go 3 deep.
Yes. And the third guy was hurt too.
And the
throughout
third
much
guy
of the
was hurt.
season. Yeah.
So it's picking and choosing your spots a little bit. I agree with him in principle that when it comes to this spring, and this was something that they didn't really have a benefit of last year, because remember, even though Casey Thompson was still on the team officially last spring, he couldn't go through and do any reps anyway. But you want everybody that you do have that you're planning to move forward with as QBs 1, 2, and 3 to be healthy in the spring so they can all go through the reps. So, I know some might be alarmed and say, oh my God, they're only going to have 3. I think what you want to be is in a position where you can go 4 deep if you have to, knowing that you probably won't, but it's a nice insurance policy to have.
Yeah, I think that you just described it very, very well. I think the concern right now from a lot of folks is not the number of players they have in the quarterback room, but the number of players with experience. And the one guy that has experience, people don't really trust a whole lot, right? Like,
no.
if the quarterback that they had in the room was Casey Thompson and not Heinrich Harburg, I don't think that there would be as much consternation. But because it is Harburg, a guy who has started and, performed very inconsistently, and dare I say, John, the longer the season went on, honestly, the worse he got. I think that's where a lot of the concern comes from. It's funny too. We talked a few minutes ago or right before we got going about the scholarship numbers and how that's something that, we used to worry about, and we just have to kind of change our view. Rhule alluded to that pretty early in the press conference, saying that people stop him on the street asking him about scholarship numbers, which I love the visual of. But how about this from Johnny Pig? He says, this is his best trick yet. Get people so worried about scholarship numbers that they stop asking about the walk-on program. We never talk about the walk-on program anymore, John.
Well, he did at the very beginning. He said, I was a walk-on and I like to walk on. So what this is it's more adjusting to the new norm. Nebraska was never a school either by philosophy or because it wasn't allowed by their conference to oversign. And so you would never see in the period where we've had a 25-person limit. I know if you go way back, Nebraska would have 40-player, recruiting classes, but that was back in a time when the roster, their scholarship limits were over 100.
Yeah.
But in we'll call it the modern age of football, we've been kind of stuck with 25-man signing limit. And there's always been this, call it concern or call it, pearl clutching or whatever about schools that quote unquote oversign or go over their scholarship limit and what are they going to do? Nebraska's never really done that. Well, they've never been in a position where they could do that. Whether it's by their own philosophy or by rule. Now, because, basically you can flip an entire roster in 1 year, as we saw Deion Sanders do last year, is just a new reality to get used to. And Rhule made it pretty blunt, don't worry about it. We're going to get there, which is why I have been more focused on the total number of players who will be on the team and on the roster, not the scholarship players, because it's that total number where you have to factor in Title IX and other sports. And so, what the roster size looks like, the overall roster size, to me is the more interesting question than how are you going to get under 85? They're going to figure it out. Everyone else does it. They'll do it too. Yeah. Obviously, it's not something they're going to forget. It's kind of like,
oh man, crap.
Yeah. It's kind of like, taking out the trash. you know, you just, when you see it piling up, you realize, oh crap, I need to take this out. So
yeah, how they manage just egos and playing time. That's the more interesting quandary of all of this. It's not will they get down to 85? It's not like they won't. They will do that. Okay, so then you figure out, okay, what about playing time though? And how is this going to work out at these various positions?
Couple other things that at least I was interested in there towards the end. You heard him talk about the relationship or the dynamic between Marcus Satterfield and Glenn Thomas, the new quarterback coach / co-OC. I almost thought if Matt Rhule was in the mood to be humorous, he almost could have described Thomas as the assistant to the regional manager, kind of the Dwight Schrute title when it comes to calling plays.
He didn't like the simple question, hey, who's going to call plays?
Yeah.
I told you, it's going to be Satterfield.
Now, listen, it is a good question because people see the title co-OC and, they do wonder. And I've been very curious about just how the dynamic's going to work. Who's going to run the room? Who's going to design the plays? Who's going to have the ultimate say? Because at the end of the day, as much of a collaborative effort as you want in designing the game plan, designing plays, etc., at the end of the day, one person's got to make the play call. Whether it's a head coach, a coordinator, or the quarterback, somebody's got to make the play call. And so it is a good question. And, I'm glad that Rhule, made it pretty clear there because it is anytime you see offensive coordinator or co-offensive coordinator, you think, oh, so these guys are how are they going to call plays? So it's a good question to ask. And I'm glad that Rhule was very blunt in saying, hey, Sat is our play caller. Thomas is going to coach the quarterbacks. And he's going to be involved in helping design plays. That's perfectly fine to me. But if you wanted to give him a better title, I would say assistant to the regional manager would have been a funny way to handle it.
Yeah, he'll be quarterbacks coach. That's the thing that's more important to me. It's not who's calling plays. It's is there going to be someone who's going to take care of the quarterbacks?
The other observation I had was when he talked about early on about being tired and how hard they worked this weekend. Consider this, folks. This is the wrap up of this recruiting cycle, of which 95% of the harvest was pulled in last December. And I realized that some of the work that they've been doing over the last, we'll call it 3 weeks, was also looking ahead to the 2025 class. They had the junior day and all this other stuff. But the fact that they are putting in this kind of time and this kind of effort right now for something that won't bear fruit for 18 more months. A lot of the guys they were talking to won't even be on campus for another 12 to 18 months. And so I realize a lot of coaches do this. This shouldn't be a shock. Coaches work hard, but it is kind of fascinating to hear how much work they have already started to put in as we see Nebraska change their philosophy. We have become so accustomed to seeing Nebraska finish their classes late in the game versus how a lot of other programs have done it. And that is to basically lock everyone in, the summer before. And so how much this hard work this month and last month is going to bear fruit in May, June, July. And will Nebraska be in a similar place this year as they were last year at the same time, where most of their commits were pretty much in-house, or not in-house, but pretty much, in before the start of the season. And so they really were kind of fine-tuning their class during the season versus actually going out and trying to build most of their class.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, we always used to do the whole, first full class conversation with a staff to maybe learn more about how they're really going to operate. I'm curious to see now what that looks like, given that they have a full season under their belt. The world of recruiting has changed so much. And are they able to parlay some of the Dylan Raiola buzz into something bigger with the 2025 group?
So those are some of the observations I had. Did you have anything else that caught your attention?
No, not so much. Hit on the scholarship numbers. I think that the quarterback stuff at the very end, or not wanting a 1-year starter. I thought that his answer there was very good because it was less, we will never do it, and more, I just don't want to get into a rotation where it's one, and that makes a lot of sense. I don't think in a program like in Nebraska that you're going to want to roll, from 1 to 1 to 1. I did see this because he was still speaking or is still speaking. I don't know, but he mentioned the excitement around recruiting. And, one of the things we always talk about, John, is winning the offseason. This is reading Mitch Sherman. It doesn't mean much of anything until the Huskers win as a result of it. Quote, we're 5-7 until we kick it off against UTEP next year, end quote. So Rhule certainly not going to throw parades about how well they've done with the additions and he knows that they're a 5-7 football team until next year.
One other thing I'm reading from Robin Washett's play-by-play, Jamal Banks, the Wake Forest
Mr. Banks,
the Wake Forest wide receiver transfer, is the current leading point getter in Nebraska's off-season competition.
The single-digit numbers.
Yeah, which works in the weight room, the classroom, and in the community. This was the thing. Wasn't this the thing that your boy Fedoni won last year?
Did he win it?
He either won it or he was one of the guys that was up there.
This isn't the single-digit numbers thing.
This is the weight. This is how you do in the weight room, the classroom, and the community. So, leading people on field trips or going to women's basketball games or soccer matches or whatever. But Jamal Banks is currently the leading point getter. So there you go.
Not surprised that a guy named Banks is kicking ass. Sounds like my dog.
Good, Mr. Banks.
Mr. Banks.
You're comparing a Nebraska wide receiver to your dog?
My dog's awesome. Banks is such a great dog. This is a compliment.
You can't catch a football.
You
can't catch a football.
He's really bad at catching. We throw popcorn at him and it hits him in his face. Come on, Banks, catch the popcorn. What are you doing?
Great. I look forward to the first time one of Dylan's throws hits Banks in the face mask.